Long ago, in a quiet village, lived a man named Imran. He owned a small grocery shop, not rich, not poor, just surviving. He worked every day to feed himself and his only son, Faris. Faris had never worked a single day in his life. His father never made him lift a finger. But one morning, everything changed. Imran died suddenly, leaving behind nothing but a shop and his son's tears. Faris sat alone outside the shop. His father's old friend placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, life would not stop for your grave. Take care of what your father built." Faris nodded. He tried, but days passed and not a single customer came. The shelves got older, the hope got weaker. Finally, he decided to sell the shop and start fresh in another town. He packed his few belongings and reached a busy city where everything was expensive and he had little money left. So he came up with a crazy idea. He rented a small corner shop and hung a large sign outside, "Wisdom for sale." People laughed at him. Some called him mad. "Who sell wisdom?" They mocked. "Who would buy it?" But Faris only smiled and said, "Everyone needs wisdom someday." Days passed. Finally, a curious man came, half joking, and said, "All right, give me one coin's worth of wisdom." Faris smiled, took the coin, wrote something on a paper, and handed it to the man. The paper said, "When two people fight, don't stand and watch." The man laughed. "I paid for this," he said. But Faris didn't react. He just bowed politely. That man was rich old merchant, and he had a son, a simple innocent boy named Munir. One day the old man told Munir, "Son, we must grow wisdom like crops. It makes life valuable." The next morning he found Munir digging soil in the yard, planting seeds. The father shouted, "You fool! You can't plant wisdom." Munir replied, "But you said we should grow it." The father held his head and sighed, "Oh, when will your wisdom grow?" Later that week, Munir walked through the market and saw Faris' sign, "Wisdom for sale." He thought, maybe this is what father meant. He went inside and said, "How much for wisdom?" Faris said, "As much as you can pay. Wisdom is never cheap." Munir hesitated, then paid one coin. Faris handed him the same note. "When two people fight, don't stand and watch." Munir took it home proudly, saying, "Father, look, I bought wisdom." The old man read it and got furious. "You fool, everyone knows this." He stormed to Faris' shop, demanded his money to back, and threw the paper in Faris' face. Faris smiled calmly and returned the coin. Days later, in the royal market, two maids from the king's palace began fighting over a watermelon. They shouted, cursed, and grabbed each other's arms. And who happened to walk by? Munir. He stopped and remembered the line from that crumpled piece of paper: "When two people fight, don't stand and watch." So he turned around, walked away. Moments later, guards arrived. Both maids accused each other of theft. The king summoned all witnesses, including Munir, who had walked away. When the king asked Munir, "Do you see what happened?" Munir remembered Faris' new advice and decided to act clever. He pretended to be crazy. He made wild faces, spoke nonsense, and laughed at nothing. The king frowned. "He is mad. Get him out of here." And just like that, Munir walked free. His father couldn't believe it. The same foolish boy had saved himself using that one coins of wisdom. But the father was scared. What if the king find out you were pretending? We will lose our heads. He ran to Faris again and begged, "Please, give us more wisdom. Save us." Faris said, I will, but this time it costs 200 coins. The old man gasped, but agreed. Faris whispered, when the time is right, tell the truth. Truth will set you free. Weeks later, Munir stood before the king again, trembling. He confessed everything, how he fagged madness, how he bowed to wisdom. The king was stunned, then smiled and said, you are wiser than I thought. If you hadn't pretended that day, you would have been punished unfairly. You are forgiven. The king asked, who sold you such wisdom? Munir said proudly, a man named Faris. The king said, bring him to my court. Faris stood before the king. The king asked, can you sell me wisdom too? Faris bowed and said, yes, Majesty, but wisdom has value, 20,000 gold coins. The king laughed and paid. Faris wrote a single sentence on a paper and handed it to him. Never act without thinking. The king smiled. Simple, yet powerful. He placed that note beside his bed. Days later, the king fell ill. A corrupt minister plotted to kill him. He bribed the royal doctor to poison the medicine. When the doctor presented it, the king reached for the cup, then froze. Faris' words echoed in his mind. Never act without thinking. He looked carefully at the doctor, who began to sweat, tremble, and finally fell to his knees, confessing everything. The king's life was saved, but the wisdom he bought. The king ordered the minister and doctor imprisoned. Then he called Faris back to the place and said, your wisdom saved my life. From this day, you shall be my most trusted advisor. And so, the poor merchant who once sold wisdom for a coin became the wisest man in the kingdom. So, the last message for you: wisdom doesn't come from books or wealth or luck, it comes from patience, courage, and the will to think before you act. Sometimes, one wise thought can save your entire life. Subscribe for more life changing stories.